The interstellar research vessel Luminous Accord had been drifting through the Epsilon sector for exactly 73 days when the food synthesizers decided to commit what could only be described as mechanical suicide. Not a gradual decline, mind you, not a polite cough and a warning light. No, the entire nutritional fabrication system simply looked at its purpose in life, said absolutely not, and gave up entirely in a spectacular cascade of sparks, smoke, and what the ship's engineer swore was a sound resembling mocking laughter. Commander Kickstall of the Vrelian Navy stood in the synthesizer bay, all 7 feet of his crystalline scaled form reflecting the emergency lighting in deeply unflattering shades of red. His secondary arms were crossed while his primary arms gestured at the smoking wreckage with the kind of restrained fury that suggested someone was going to have a very bad performance review. "Explain," he said, his translator rendering the word in flat, dangerous tones. The engineer, a blob-like Glorthan named Vexim, quivered apologetically. The molecular recombination matrix experienced a complete systemic failure. The backup units attempted to compensate, which caused a feedback loop in the protein sequencing array, which then overloaded in language that does not require 3 advanced degrees. "They are very broken, Commander. Very, very broken." Kickstall's outer eyelids closed slowly, the Vrelian equivalent of counting to 10. "Can they be fixed?" "Not with the parts we have on board. We would need to fabricate replacement components, which would require the fabrication system, which shares core technology with the synthesizers, which are very broken." "Yes, I gathered that." The commander's translator somehow managed to convey sarcasm, which was impressive given that Vrelians communicated primarily through crystalline resonance. "What are our options?" Vexim wobbled uncertainly, consulting a datapad with one of his numerous pseudopods. "We have approximately 2 weeks of emergency nutrient packs in storage. Highly compressed, absolutely tasteless, but technically sufficient to maintain life functions. After that..." He trailed off, leaving the grim implications hanging in the recycled air. "After that, we starve. Technically, we would enter severe nutritional deficit, leading to systematic organ failure. But yes, colloquially speaking, we would starve." The emergency meeting was called within the hour. The crew gathered in the main assembly hall, a collection of species from across the known galaxy, all united by the common threads of scientific curiosity and impending starvation. There were Corthaxians with their insectoid grace, several Glorthans still wobbling from the shock of it all, a pair of vapor-form ethereals hovering anxiously near the ceiling, and 3 humans sitting together in the back row, looking remarkably unconcerned about the whole dying situation. Kishtol outlined the problem with military precision. 2 weeks of nutrient packs, 3 months to the nearest station with supplies, no way to call for help faster than a rescue ship could reach them. The mathematics were, as the humans liked to say, not in their favor. "We could enter stasis," suggested Plyke, a junior xenobiologist whose Corthaxian antennae were twitching with barely suppressed panic. "Reduce our metabolic needs, wait for rescue. Our stasis pods require a functioning medical bay, which requires power allocation we cannot spare if we want to maintain life support and propulsion. We could abandon the research mission, go to maximum thrust, try to reach the station before we run out of supplies. The fuel expenditure would be enormous, and we would still fall short by several weeks. We could land on the planet." The voice came from the back of the room, casual and utterly calm. Every sensory organ in the room turned toward Marcus Chen, the human geologist. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, looking for all the world like someone discussing weekend plans rather than survival strategies. Kishtol's translator made a sound of confusion. "The planet we are surveying." The uninhabited planet with no established infrastructure. That's the one. Marcus glanced at his fellow humans, Elena Rodriguez and Devon Okafor, who both nodded. It's habitable. Class M, plenty of water, breathable atmosphere, robust ecosystem. We were supposed to spend another month studying it anyway. But there are no supply stations on the surface, no synthesizer facilities, no food distribution networks. Pike's antenna had gone completely rigid with incomprehension. How would we eat? Elena leaned forward, her expression suggesting she was trying very hard to be patient. We would get food from the planet. From the planet? Yes, the planet itself. That is generally where food comes from, yes. The silence that followed was the kind of profound existential quiet that occurs when two entirely different worldviews collide, and neither one is quite sure how to proceed. In the 30,000-year history of Relian civilization, food had come from synthesizers. Before that, it had come from industrial nutritional processing facilities. The concept of acquiring sustenance directly from an environment was something their distant ancestors might have done back in the archaeological record, but certainly not something anyone had attempted in living memory. I do not understand, Kishtal said finally. We know, Devon replied, not unkindly. But trust us on this one. Land the ship near water, give us a few days, and nobody has to starve. The vote was closer than the humans expected. In the end, survival instinct won out over confusion, but barely. The Luminous Accord touched down on the planetary surface with all the grace of a building having second thoughts about architecture. They landed in a river valley, just as Marcus had insisted, where a wide, clear waterway cut through dense vegetation under a sky that was almost, but not quite, the right shade of blue. The humans were off the ship before the landing struts had finished settling, which gave the alien crew members yet another moment of concerned confusion. They watched through observation ports as the three humans spread out along the riverbank, poking at things, picking up rocks, examining plants with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for laboratory work. What are they doing? Vexim asked, pressed against the viewing glass. Field research, I assume, Pike replied, recording everything with multiple cameras. This was, after all, a rare opportunity to observe human behavior in a crisis situation. Marcus was crouched by the water's edge, running his hands through a deposit of grey-brown clay. He nodded to himself, scooped up a sample, and moved on. Elena had found a cluster of broad-leafed plants and was carefully testing them with a portable scanner before picking several and placing them in a collection bag. Devon stood knee-deep in the river, completely still, watching the water with predatory focus. They appear to be collecting samples, Kixtel observed. Though I fail to see how geological and botanical surveys will address our food shortage. Devon moved suddenly, hands plunging into the water. There was a splash, a brief struggle, and then he straightened up holding something that thrashed and glittered in the sunlight. What in the name of the celestial archives is that? Vexim had gone a paler shade of translucent. According to the preliminary surveys, the local aquatic fauna, a fish analog. Pike zoomed in his recording equipment. Approximately 30 centimeters long, scaled, shows typical vertebrate structure for this evolutionary environment. But why would he? The xenobiologist's antenna dropped in sudden horrified realization. I believe the humans intend to eat it. The revelation spread through the alien crew like a particularly disturbing rumor. They watched as Devon waded out of the water with his catch, as Marcus and Elena returned with their own findings, as the three humans sat down on the riverbank, and began discussing their haul with the casual efficiency of people who had done this sort of thing before. "We need nets," Marcus was saying, examining the fish Devon had caught. "The river's full of these. We can probably catch enough in a day to feed everyone for a week if we preserve them properly." "Smoke them?" Elena suggested. "Smoke them," Marcus agreed. "We'll need to build racks. Get a good fire going with the right kind of wood. Those trees over there should work. The green wood will give us the low, steady smoke we need." Devon was already sketching plans in the dirt with a stick. "I can rig up some traps using ship materials and local materials. And I saw what looked like freshwater mussels further downstream. We should check if they're safe to eat." The aliens had sent a delegation down to the surface, led by Kickstal, because observing through screens was no longer providing adequate context for what they were witnessing. They approached the human camp with the caution of anthropologists entering an uncontacted tribe's territory. "Explain what you are doing," Kickstal said without preamble. Marcus looked up from where he was weaving something intricate out of salvaged fiber optic cables and vine-like plants. "Making a net. For catching fish. We have established that there are aquatic creatures in the river. We have not established why you are catching them. To eat them. The creatures are alive." "Not for long," Devon said cheerfully, returning from the ship with an armful of supplies. "That's kind of the point." Plyke's translator made a sound of distress. "But they are living organisms, part of the planetary ecosystem. They have biological functions, and possibly even rudimentary neural activity." Elena paused in her sorting of edible plants. "Yes, and you intend to terminate their biological functions and consume their physical matter. We call it fishing, but sure, that's technically accurate." The cultural chasm had never felt wider. The Corthaxians had been vegetarian synthesizer users for 8,000 years. The Vrelians had evolved past what they considered primitive consumption 3 times that long ago. The Glorthans absorbed nutrients through osmotic membranes. The very concept of killing something and eating it was so far removed from their cultural context that they struggled to process it as anything other than either barbarism or elaborate performance art. "That seems," Kuxtal searched for a diplomatic word, "unnecessarily direct." "It's efficient," Marcus countered, testing the strength of his improvised net. "The river has fish. We need food. The fish are food. Therefore we catch the fish. But where is the supply chain? The processing facility? The quality control? The regulatory oversight?" "Right here." Marcus tapped his temple. "Humanity spent about 200,000 years doing this before we invented agriculture. We spent another 12,000 doing agriculture before we invented synthesizers. This is not mysterious ancient knowledge. This is Tuesday. Over the next several hours, the humans constructed what could only be described as an arsenal of food acquisition technology, assuming one's definition of technology was broad enough to include pointy sticks. Devon had fashioned a spear using a piece of metal from a damaged sensor array and a straight branch. Elena had created fish traps from woven local plant matter that looked primitive but demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior and water flow. Marcus's net was a work of art, combining salvaged ship materials with natural fibers in a way that probably violated several safety regulations but was undeniably functional. The aliens watched from a safe distance as Devon waded back into the river with his spear. They documented the moment of first successful catch with the solemnity usually reserved for first contact situations. In a way, it was a kind of first contact, a meeting between spacefaring civilizations and the fundamental reality of where food actually came from. By evening there were 17 fish laid out on the riverbank, and the aliens' academic fascination was rapidly being replaced by something resembling existential dread. "They are going to eat those," Vexim said quietly. "All of them," Plyke confirmed. "The creatures were swimming peacefully in the river this morning, and now they are deceased and awaiting consumption. This is the most disturbing thing I have ever documented, and I once studied the mating rituals of the Chthonian deep dwellers." Marcus had begun the process of preparing the fish, which involved a knife and techniques that made several aliens turn away, or in the case of the vapor form ethereals, simply dissipate in distress and reconstitute somewhere else. He worked with practiced efficiency, removing parts that were not useful and setting aside the parts that were. "You are dismantling their biological structure," Kuxtal observed, his tone carefully neutral. "Cleaning them," Marcus corrected. "You do not want to eat certain parts. Internal organs, scales, that sort of thing. Why not simply synthesize the desirable nutritional components?" "Because our synthesizer is broken." "Try to keep up, Commander." Elena was building a structure using rocks from the river and branches from nearby trees. It looked like a frame, elevated about a meter off the ground, with careful attention paid to spacing and airflow. Meanwhile, Devon was constructing what appeared to be a permanent camp setup, complete with a fire pit, flat rocks arranged as work surfaces, a water collection system using salvaged containers, and racks clearly designed for drying or storing something. "They are building infrastructure," Plyke noted, recording everything. "Primitive, but highly functional infrastructure." "Infrastructure for what?" "I believe they are creating a food processing facility." Marcus had started a fire, which caused immediate alarm, until he patiently explained that controlled combustion was safe and, more importantly, necessary. He arranged green wood in a specific pattern, creating smoke rather than flames, and carefully placed the prepared fish on the elevated rack. "This is smoking," he explained to his audience of baffled aliens. "The smoke preserves the meat, adds flavor, and kills any harmful bacteria. We can store smoked fish for weeks without refrigeration." "Meat," Vexim's translator made the word sound like a curse. "The flesh of the fish, the part we are going to eat. It has a specific word. Many specific words, actually. Humans have been doing this long enough to develop extensive vocabulary about it." The aliens watched the smoke curl around the fish, watched Marcus adjust the wood to maintain the right temperature, watched the whole impossible process with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for natural disasters. This was not how civilized species acquired nutrition. This was something their evolutionary ancestors might have done in the dark prehistory of their species, before technology, before society, before the comforting distance between living creatures and nutritional intake. And yet, the humans moved through these tasks with casual competence, talking and laughing as they worked. Elena had found tubers that tested safe for human consumption and was roasting them at the edge of the fire. Devon was attempting to make a form of bread using seeds from a grain-like plant, water, and what he assured everyone was going to work despite having no proper equipment. Marcus tended his smoking rack like a craftsman at work, occasionally adding wood or adjusting fish positions with the kind of attention to detail that suggested this was not just survival, but something approaching art. "They are enjoying this," Keastel said, and his translator managed to convey profound bewilderment. "Humans have a strange relationship with adversity," Plyke observed. "I have been reviewing their cultural databases. They seem to find satisfaction in overcoming challenges using minimal resources. They call it various things: camping, bushcraft, survival skills. It appears to be recreational for them. They do this for fun, apparently, when they are not in actual survival situations. Their species concerns me." Days passed. The humans had settled into a routine that looked suspiciously like they were planning to stay forever. Marcus's smoking operation had expanded to include a second rack. Elena had mapped every edible plant within a kilometer of camp and started a small garden of particularly useful specimens. Devon had built what could only be described as a kitchen, complete with a stone oven constructed from river rocks and clay, multiple work surfaces, a cleaning station, and storage areas. The aliens, meanwhile, were running out of nutrient packs and facing a decision that was becoming less theoretical and more desperately practical with each passing meal. The humans had invited them to dinner. "Absolutely not," Vexim said, wobbling with agitation. "I cannot consume deceased organisms. It is against every principle of modern civilization. Modern civilization is 3 months away, and we will be dead in 4 days," Keastel replied. "I am open to suggestions that do not involve starvation." The crew had gathered in the ship's mess hall, which now felt deeply ironic given that it contained no food. The humans were outside by their Riverside kitchen, preparing what they called a feast. The smell was wafting through the ship's ventilation system, and several crew members had noted that it was a remarkably pleasant smell, which only added to their moral confusion. "It is not sterile," one of the Carthaxians argued. "It was not prepared in a controlled laboratory environment. It came from the planet, from the river, from living creatures. All food comes from living things originally," Elena had explained earlier when questioned. "Your synthesizers are just rebuilding complex organic molecules from simpler components. We are just skipping the middle part. The middle part is civilization. The middle part is machinery. Machinery that is currently broken." Plyke's antenna twitched as internal conflict played out across his carapace's color patterns. As a xenobiologist, he understood intellectually that consumption of organic matter was a normal part of most ecosystems. As a Carthaxian who had never eaten anything that did not come from a synthesizer, the idea of putting something directly from an environment into his mouth was triggering every cultural taboo his society had developed over millennia. But he was also, undeniably, incredibly hungry. The nutrient packs were gone. His body was beginning to consume its own resources, and that smell from outside was doing something very strange to his digestive system, activating responses he did not know he had. "I will volunteer," he said quietly. "For science, for science," the others echoed, though whether they meant it or were just grateful someone else was going first was unclear. The Riverside kitchen had been transformed. The humans had arranged flat rocks as a dining surface, complete with smaller rocks as seats. There were woven leaf mats serving as plates, cups made from hollowed gourds, and utensils fashioned from polished wood. It looked like something from an archaeological exhibit on primitive cultures, except it was happening right now, and the primitives in question could also repair a quantum flux drive. The food was laid out with what appeared to be genuine pride. Smoked fish, golden and glistening, roasted tubers that had caramelized at the edges. The bread Devon had made, which had miraculously worked and now sat in torn pieces steaming slightly. Elena had made something she called a salad, using local greens and a dressing from crushed seeds and water. There were even grilled mushroom analogues that Marcus swore were delicious. Plyke approached the arrangement like it might explode. His compound eyes took in every detail. His antenna analyzed chemical compositions. His scientific training warred with his cultural conditioning. "It is safe?" he asked. "We have been eating it for days," Elena assured him. "Human biochemistry is not identical to Carthaxian biochemistry, but we scanned everything. It should be fine. Might even be nutritious." "How do I?" "Pick it up. Put it in your mouth. Chew, swallow. Your species does have mouths, right?" Plyke's mandibles clicked in what his translator rendered as nervous laughter. He reached out with one delicate manipulator appendage and picked up a small piece of smoked fish. It was warm. It had texture. It had been a living creature that morning, and now it was food, and he was about to eat it. He put it in his mouth. The first thing that hit him was the fact that it had taste, not the uniform, optimized nutritional profile of synthesized food, but actual distinct complex taste. Smoky and rich, and slightly salty and fundamentally different from anything he had ever experienced. His antenna shot straight up in shock. "Well?" Kickstall asked from a safe distance. Plyke chewed slowly, his entire sensory system trying to process what was happening. The texture was strange, fibrous and flaky at the same time. The flavor kept changing as he chewed, revealing layers of complexity. It was not optimized or refined or carefully balanced. It was chaotic and organic, and somehow absolutely wonderful. He swallowed. "By the 7 moons of Corthax," he said quietly. "That was food." "Yes," Marcus sounded confused. "That is what we have been saying." "No, you do not understand. That was food. Real food. Food with taste and texture and complexity." Plyke reached for another piece, his cultural conditioning evaporating in the face of actual deliciousness. "How did you make it taste like this?" "We did not make it taste like anything. That is just what it tastes like. Food has flavor. That is a normal property of food." The other aliens had crept closer, watching Plyke eat with the fascination of observers at a radical scientific experiment. The Corthaxian was on his 3rd piece of fish, had tried the bread, was now attempting the roasted tubers. "It is different," Plyke reported between bites. "Every item has distinct sensory properties. The fish has smoke flavor and salt. The bread is soft and warm and slightly sweet. The tubers are earthy and rich. This is incredible. This is..." He paused, searching for words. "This is how food is supposed to be, is it not? Before we optimized all the pleasure out of it in the name of efficiency." Cookstall approached slowly, his crystalline scales reflecting the firelight. If an advanced alien species could look sheepish, he was managing it. "May I?" "Help yourself." Elena gestured at the spread. "We made plenty." One by one, the alien crew members tried the human-prepared food. There were initial reactions of shock, confusion, and in one memorable case, what appeared to be a religious experience. Vexim absorbed some of the smoked fish through osmosis and changed colors in a way that apparently indicated extreme satisfaction. The ethereals could not eat it, but hovered close enough to absorb the aromatic molecules, which they declared fascinating. The meal went on for hours. The aliens asked countless questions. How did you know which plants were safe? How did you know how long to smoke the fish? How did you build an oven from rocks and clay? The humans answered patiently, explaining techniques that humanity had developed over hundreds of thousands of years, knowledge so fundamental they rarely thought about it, but so alien to species who had synthesized their nutrition for millennia. "Your ancestors did this?" Cookstall asked, working his way through a second helping of everything. "All our ancestors did this," Marcus replied. "Every species started somewhere. You all had to eat before you had synthesizers. You just forgot." "We did not forget. We evolved past the need." "Did you, though?" Elena gestured at the aliens enthusiastically consuming food prepared over an open fire using Stone Age technology. "Because you all seem pretty happy about this right now." Cookstall had no response to that, mostly because his mouth was full of bread. The weeks that followed were transformative in ways that had nothing to do with nutrition and everything to do with philosophy. The humans taught anyone who wanted to learn. Pike became obsessed with fishing, standing in the river for hours perfecting his technique. Vexim learned to forage, his blob-like form surprisingly adept at moving through underbrush. Even Cookstall could be found by the smoking racks, learning to maintain the right temperature and smoke density. They were not just surviving. They were learning something their civilizations had forgotten, a connection between sustenance and environment that synthesizers had severed. Food was not just nutrients to be consumed. It was a relationship with the planet you stood on, the water you drank from, the ecosystem you were part of. The repair ship arrived on day 37, its holds full of replacement parts and emergency supplies. The captain of the rescue vessel was confused to find the Luminous Accord crew perfectly healthy, well-fed, and somewhat reluctant to leave. "We have replacement synthesizers," the rescue captain announced. "You can return to normal operations." "About that," Kickstall said slowly. "Define normal." They packed up eventually, but the Riverside kitchen remained, a monument to the strange weeks when the food ran out and humanity taught the galaxy how to fish. The humans carefully stored the smoking racks for transport. Elena dug up her garden to take samples back. Devon had sketched detailed plans for what he called a proper kitchen to be installed on the ship, one that did not rely entirely on synthesizers. The alien crew members had changed. They had tasted food with flavor, participated in its creation, understood the satisfaction of preparing a meal rather than pressing a button. Some of them were not eager to return to optimized nutritional paste, no matter how efficient it was. "The synthesizers are repaired and installed," the engineering team reported. "Excellent," Kickstall replied. "We will use them for emergencies." "Sir, we have fish to smoke, and Marcus is teaching me to make bread." The Luminous Accord lifted off eventually, its holds full of samples and data, and several containers of smoked fish that were being rationed with surprising strictness. In the cargo bay, Devon and Pike were constructing what the manifest listed as alternative nutritional preparation station, but what everyone called the kitchen. Marcus stood at one of the observation windows, watching the planet recede below them. Elena joined him, carrying 2 cups of something that definitely did not come from a synthesizer. "Think they learned anything?" she asked. "They learned to fish." "That is not what I meant." Marcus smiled. "They learned that advanced does not always mean better. That sometimes the old ways were old because they worked. That technology should serve life, not replace it." Very philosophical. I have been spending too much time with Kickstall. He gets deep when you teach him to smoke meat. Somewhere in the ship, Pike was explaining fishing net construction to a group of fascinated Corthaxians. Vexim was cultivating edible plants in the hydroponics bay, an area previously used only for research. Kickstall was in the mess hall, not eating synthesized food from the wall dispenser, but instead preparing something involving actual ingredients and actual cooking. The galaxy's most advanced species had been taught to fish by 3 humans, who happened to remember that their ancestors were pretty good at not starving. It was not the most dramatic first contact scenario in the historical record. There were no galaxy-saving revelations or universe-altering discoveries. But in the mess hall of the Luminous Accord, as aliens who had evolved past such primitive concerns carefully tended a cooking fire and discussed smoke density and proper seasoning, perhaps something more important had happened. They had remembered that before you can reach the stars, you have to eat. And sometimes the most advanced technology is knowing how to find food when all your fancy machines break down. Marcus raised his cup toward the planet below, toward the Riverside kitchen they had built and left behind. "To fishing," he said. Elena clinked her cup against his. "To fishing, and in the cargo hold, Pike successfully cast his improvised net for the first time in zero gravity, which went about as well as expected, but demonstrated admirable commitment to the craft. Some lessons, it turned out, were universal, even if you had to travel 300 light-years to learn them.